I don't use PowerPoint, but I thought it would be useful for me to put the outline of my presentation up there. This is the beginning and the end. You won't get any slides after that. You have to listen. So I want to talk about the current policy of the ANC. And by current here, we mean 2017, December 2017, the outcome of the conference and the beginning of this year. The ANC statement on the 13th of January, commemorating their birthday, which is the 8th. And then the second section will focus on the historical context. Now, historical, I just want to contextualize this policy and where it comes from. Why 2018 and not 1994, for example? And then the tougher question is this policy implementable in terms of how we understand it now? And then I want to end with my own reflections. Because the issue of land reform in South Africa and the question of what some of us call the property clause is an issue that I've been dealing with since 2004. And I've been publishing on the topic since then. So what is this policy, the current policy of the ANC? After years of supporting a market-led land reform program and not listening to criticisms of this policy, the ANC leadership has suddenly changed gear, at least at the level of rhetoric, and advanced a radical thesis of expropriating land without compensation. Expropriation without compensation was endorsed as policy at the 54th conference of the ANC that was held in Nasrec in Gauteng between the 16th and the 20th of December last year, 2017. The decision was taken on the 20th of December. There was a special commission on land which made the recommendation. In an interview with Karima Brown, a journalist and political analyst, Enoch Godongwana, who happens to be my homeboy, like Gwede Mantashe, but he was speaking in his capacity as the ANC's Economic Transformation Committee chairperson. I think that's his position there. He confirmed that, and I quote him, the newly elected leadership of the party, which is the ANC, is committed to expropriating land without compensation. He immediately pointed out that expropriation would be done, and I quote him, in a sustainable way, unquote. That would not have a negative impact on other sectors. And he specifically mentioned food production and food security. The newly elected president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, has also endorsed the issue of expropriation without compensation as the new policy of the ANC. Addressing King Goodwill Zwelithini of AmaZulu at his Osutu Palace at Nongoma on Sunday, 7th of January this year, when he was introducing the top 6 of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, This is what Ramaphosa said after introducing the idea of expropriating land without compensation. He said that taking land should not be equal to destroying our economy. Taking land should be equal to making our economy grow, farm production grow, and went on to say that, in fact, it is possible for us to begin a process of working the land and improving agriculture, making it a very successful factor in our country. Remember, he even used the example of Eden, that will create an Eden in South Africa. Ramaphosa made an undertaking to the king that the ANC would build on the enormous potential of agriculture to promote industrialization, create employment, and transform our economy, as he put it, an economy that would be open for business and investment. King Zwelithini is reported to have endorsed Ramaphosa's position, indicating that he looked to Ramaphosa to act with speed. It was, of course, not reported that there was an exchange of gifts, and these gifts were in the form of cattle. Remember, our president of the ANC is also a farmer, cattle, and also a game farmer, buffalo. Both Ramaphosa and Godongwana were very thin on detail as to how this would be done. All Godongwana could say was that the incoming National Executive Committee of the ANC would work out the modalities, that's his phraseology, informed by a land audit that had been commissioned and the 1992 Ready to Govern ANC document. We are waiting. Now, what is the context of this policy? I start with what the ANC inherited. The ANC in 1994 inherited an extremely skewed race-based distribution of ownership, access, and use of land. This was as a result of brutal and violent dispossession of the land of the indigenous people of this country, what we now call South Africa, by Europeans who decided to settle in the land. By 1913, when the Natives Land Act was passed and enforced, the immense majority of the indigenous people, the Africans, were restricted to reserves that we talked about over the last 3 days, which constituted, at the time, a mere 7% of the land, where they were afforded rights of occupation that we talked about. The turning point was the discovery of minerals, particularly gold, with its demand for cheap labor. For this to be achieved, the defeated Africans were to be starved of ownership of and access to land. Black farmers and peasants that were emerging in the 19th century were discouraged by the state by being denied land and support. Those of you who read about land questions in South Africa will remember the important study that Colin Bundy, the retired professor, I think he retired from Oxford University, he wrote a book, The Rise and Fall of the African Peasantry, where he showed us, demonstrated how this peasantry was rising in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and how it fell as a result of this notorious 1913 Land Act. And of course, without adequate land and support, Africans were forced to sell their labor cheaply in the mines, on farms, and the emerging white-controlled towns and cities. We discussed in the first two lectures the form of government that was introduced in the reserves and the role of chiefs in implementing the colonial and apartheid government's policies. The bulk of South Africa's agricultural land, 86%, was in the hands of white commercial farms. We're talking about agricultural land now. We're not talking about urban land. We're talking about the rural, which colonialism split into commercial farms and the bantustans. So 86% of agricultural land was in the hands of white commercial farmers who received enormous support from the state in the form of extension officers, marketing strategies, and state subsidies, all of which were denied to their African counterparts. There were about 55,000 white commercial farmers in 1994, but the number has since dropped to about 36,000 rand. Not 36,000 rand, 36,000 people, farmers. So that's what the ANC inherited in 1994. What was their response? Soon after the ANC took over, they announced a land reform program which has three components. Land restitution was meant or is meant for those who lost their land, their rights in land on and after the 19th of June, 1913, which is the date the Native Land Act was enforced. And then the second component is land redistribution, which is meant to redress racial imbalances in ownership of commercial land. And the third component is land tenure, which is there not to protect the rights of farm workers, a category that some of us in the research world called farm dwellers. That is people who live on farms but are not employed, they are not workers and so on, but they live on farms. They don't have alternative land elsewhere. And labor tenants, they are also in that vulnerable position. And of course, people living in the former homelands who have a piece of paper which, as I said the other day, is just gives them occupation rights, the permit to occupy that we talked about the other day. So this third component of the land reform program is supposed to address the issue of land tenure and tenure security. The goal of the ANC in 1994 was that 30% of agricultural land would be transferred from white to black hands. A feature of this policy was that land would be purchased from white commercial farmers. The ANC even went so far as to commit itself unforced to a willing seller, willing buyer policy. What about the performance? The land reform program has been a dismal failure, I'm afraid to say that. as already indicated, the ANC promise was that 30% of agricultural land would be transferred from white to black hands. In the first 5 years of our democracy, that's 1994 to 1999, less than 1% of land had been exchanged, had been transferred by 1999, prompting the ANC, under the leadership of Mbeki, to change the date to 2014, to say that 30% now would be transferred by 2014. As things are, 2018, only about 8% of land has been transferred to blacks under the land reform program. What changed? I would say that the emergence of the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, and specifically their stance on the land question, demanding land expropriation without compensation, clearly put pressure on the ANC. The EFF's policy had and has an appeal, especially to the youth in urban areas who need land mainly for residential purposes. The EFF was clearly capitalizing on so-called service delivery protests, which have been a feature of South Africa since the turn of the century, under the presidency of Mbeki. Further, the EFF rise occurred in the context of deep divisions within the ANC and loss of confidence in the ANC, as evidenced by the results of the 2016 local government elections. It is, I would argue, against this background that we should understand the ANC's about turn on the land question. It is Zuma who set the ball rolling. You might have seen the land question as yet another instrument at his disposal that would extend his lease of life in the ANC. He expressed his intention as early as January 2017, when he delivered the ANC's anniversary statement in Soweto on the 8th of January 2017. This is what he said. It is time, what he said on the land question, not the entire statement. It is time to return land to our people. Our land reform and land redistribution programs have shown measurable success. We must show courage and determination to ensure that the land is returned to the people. The Constitution allows for expropriation of land for a public purpose and in the public interest. This year, we shall begin to utilize the Expropriation of Land Act to pursue land reform and land redistribution with greater speed and urgency, following the prescripts of our Constitution, unquote. You would take up the issue of expropriation using the Act and acting within the Constitution. You would take up that issue in his State of the Nation address, which was on the 9th of February last year. And this is what he said. Compatriots, it will be difficult, if not impossible, to achieve through reconciliation until the land question is resolved. Only 8 million hectares of arable land have been transferred to black people, which is only 9.8. Well, I don't know, maybe he's more accurate than me, but it's still less than 10% of the 82 million hectares of arable land in South Africa. We have stated our intention of using the Expropriation Act to pursue land reform and land redistribution in line with the Constitution. Less than 2 weeks later, in a speech on the 24th of February 2017, where he was outlining the agricultural policy, Zuma changed gear and announced that South Africa was going to change its laws to allow government to expropriate land without compensation. This, in my research, is the first time he mentions the issue of non-compensation. According to him, and I quote him, "We are busy amending laws to enable faster land reform, including land expropriation without compensation as provided for in the Constitution." Of course, he had it, as it will be clear, towards the end of my talk. He had it wrong not to say that they could expropriate land without compensation within the Constitution, the current Constitution. Zuma repeated his call for expropriation of land without compensation in March 2017, when he opened the National House of Traditional Leaders. And he took the same position to the ANC's 5th policy conference, which was held in July 2017. And this is what he said in his closing remarks in July 2017 at this policy conference. "We agree on the imperative to accelerate land redistribution and land reform. Again, we had robust discussions on the modalities to achieve this. We agree that using the fiscus for land redistribution must be accompanied by other measures if we were to achieve the goal at the required pace. Where it is necessary and unavoidable, this may include expropriation without compensation. The Constitution provides for legislative changes to be effected in the democratic process." Unquote. It is important to note that Zuma made this announcement against the backdrop of the run-up to the December conference. His position on land could thus be seen not as an expression of ANC policy, but as a position of his slate, to use the term that's popular these days. Indeed, some members of the ANC rejected the notion of expropriation without compensation when Zuma first raised it at the beginning of, in February last year. Some labeling him, Zuma, a populist, and arguing that land expropriation without compensation was not the party policy. And they were right. Analysts at the same time saw Zuma's move as a massive ambush for Cyril Ramaphosa, Zuma's aim was a big win at the National ANC Policy Conference in June 2017, and from there to create an unstoppable wave heading for the elective conference of December last year. As we now know, Zuma's preferred candidate did not win the presidency of the ANC. However, on the issue of the ANC policy on land, he emerged the winner with the adoption of the expropriation of land without compensation as ANC policy. We'll discuss about this now. I want to give us no time now to debate this thing. Now, the question we should ask now is this one. Is this policy implementable? It is not possible to expropriate land without compensation under current conditions. The Constitution doesn't allow it. Those of you who are not aware of the specific section, I would refer you to Section 25 of the Constitution with the title Property. Now, in one of the subsections, the Constitution says, property may be expropriated only in terms of law of general application, subject to compensation. It's very clear that you can expropriate land, but you must compensate. And of course, there is a long list of the conditions that must be met and fulfilled to arrive at the price. Like saying how the property was attained, whether there has been any state subsidy, and current production on the farm. So in arriving at the price of the land, the market value is not the sole determinant. It's the market value less other things that may have been added by the state and so on to the value of that farm. So the price would be much lower than that. But compensation there will be. That's what the Constitution says. And what this means is that the Constitution would have to be amended, not come up with an act of parliament that would give you the power. You would have to change the Constitution because the Constitution is superior to other laws. And to do that, as we know, you need a 2/3 majority in Parliament. And not only that, you need 6 out of the 9 provinces to support the move. My sense is that it's not going to be easy to do that. It's going to take time, and there's a likelihood that there will be litigation. We know how courts have been used in this country over the last year or two, for good reason. But the thing with courts is that they are expensive. Litigation is expensive. It's for the rich, and land affects the poor. The question that arises is, where will the poor have the money to defend themselves when there is litigation? And I can tell you there will be litigation. We have been told that the matter will be taken to the court, right up to the Constitutional Court. And then, of course, there's also the fact that we're an integral part of a global economy, which, if one looks at Zimbabwe, if they switch on off the tap, we may be in trouble. My sense is that the current policy of expropriating land without compensation is just a rhetoric. It's not going to be implemented. And Cyril is unlikely to do that. I don't think that he endorsed it. He probably conceded because he's more interested in uniting the ANC than anything else. But I may be wrong. I'm not a prophet. But if you ask me on the on the balance of forces and so on, I don't think that this policy is going anywhere. But then, if it doesn't go anywhere, what are the implications for resolving the land question? And this is where I come up with my reflections. At least I've got a few minutes. I can spend about 5 minutes on this. The unresolved land question in South Africa is a time bomb. An entirely different approach is required to resolve this question if democracy is to survive in our country. That's my starting point. I'm not scaring anyone, but I think, based on what we see, the murders on farms or the killings on farms, the evictions on farms, and so on, and which outnumber sort of the number of farmers that were killed in Zimbabwe at the height of fast-track land reform and so on. That all tells us that we are sitting on a time bomb. What should we do? Or what can we do? Or what is to be done? That's what Lenin asked years ago in Russia. My starting point is the former bantustans. These were established, as we have been saying, to control the indigenous majority and to advance a racialized form of capitalist development. Dismantling the former bantustans must be a priority. The 3 lectures delivered so far have shown that for the ANC-led government, dismantling the former bantustans is not their priority. On the contrary, there is a perpetuation of this system in the countryside at both the level of land tenure and governance, which was the significance of those lectures, the lectures we gave on governance and production. As Napai pointed out yesterday, the focus on urban areas that characterizes South African scholarship since the 1970s has created a lacuna in our scholarship that needs immediate attention. The assumption that the importance of the countryside would gradually diminish has clearly been found wanting. It is well known that the overarching role and the context of the bantustans severely circumscribe the possibilities for agricultural production in these areas. Once again, I use Bandi, but there are other studies, not only in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, Rhodesia then, and so on, that confirm this. We know very little about the everyday lives of the people living in the countryside. Detailed, in-depth research on these areas thus becomes a precondition for an overhaul of the former bantustans. Yesterday, there were people, there was a lady who was seated over that side who said that land in the former homelands is not used. But when we talked after yesterday's presentation, I told her and I tried to persuade her that as an academic, I would see my first task as that of doing research and talk from an informed position, not from prejudice or whatever. Linked to this is research on the state of agriculture in South Africa. We mislead ourselves to think that white agriculture, commercial farms, are doing well. And the main purpose of, or one of the key purposes of doing research on agriculture in South Africa would be to identify unused, underutilized farms, as well as farms that are in debt. There's a lot of waste that I see wherever I do research. But what is needed is a concentrated attempt to do a thorough, in-depth research about this wastage in white commercial agriculture, not just the bantustans. It is these farms that should be targeted for expropriation so as to put them into production. A concern that is often raised whenever the land question in South Africa comes up is that the productive capacity of agriculture will be endangered. But this concern does not take into account the reality that not all of the agricultural land is under production, as the point I've made. It is precisely for this reason that I propose that the initial drive would be to target and expropriate unused land, underutilized land, as well as land that is in debt. Under these circumstances, expropriation may well lead to increase in production. With regard to the thorny issue of compensation, there would, in the first instance, be no need to compensate farmers that are in debt. In fact, we will be saving them. As far as those farms that are unused and underutilized are concerned, the legal owners of these farms would have to be persuaded that they should give up the land they are not using. A proposal that I'm making, I'm calling for a CODESA on the land question. Something that I accused the TRC of not doing. A TRC should have focused on the land question, not as the only thing to focus on, but as one of the key sort of areas to look at. We are where we are because of the land question in South Africa. And for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission not to consider that was a big mistake. But it's not over. I'm making a proposal for a CODESA where we can talk about the land question and look at land not as a commodity, but as a way, as a mechanism that can be used to reconcile this society, our society. Expropriated land would be used to address land hunger primarily in the former bantustans, but also for the benefit of farm workers and farm dwellers. Priority would be given to those who have demonstrated commitment to a land-based lifestyle and are growing crops and fruit in the gardens of their residential plots and are keeping stock. The group that Fanny was talking about yesterday. What about governance? Democratic governance and development structures should be promoted so as to do away with unelected and unaccountable individuals such as chiefs and in some provinces, headmen. The latter should be replaced by democratically elected and accountable leaders, both in development and in political initiatives. If chiefs want to be involved in development, they must be prepared to put themselves up for election. Whilst it is important to focus on the former homelands, and this is an important point, it is also necessary to ensure that these areas are not treated as isolated islands, apart from the rest of the country, which was the colonial apartheid initiative. They remain differentiated by a distinctive form of land tenure and the continued role of traditional authorities in local government. But they still form an integral part of our body politic. Moreover, the economic linkages with neighboring areas through labor and commodity exchanges suggest that an inclusive approach is necessary to understand how to transcend the geographies of apartheid. How to mesh the bantustans with the rest of South Africa and create a unitary approach in respect of land tenure and citizenship across the country is a major challenge. Finally, on the issue of agency, my well-considered view is that purely statist and technocratic solutions which do not take account of the struggles from below will simply not be able to deal with the abiding problems of land. It will take pressure and mobilization from below, with those directly affected at the heart of these struggles, to ensure that the land question is taken seriously and implemented. Given the power of global capital and a state that acts in its interests, organized social movements become a necessity. Of course, these struggles from below are indeterminate, uncertain, and unpredictable, but they hold the promise of affording ordinary people the chance to participate in the making of their own futures. Just as popular struggles from below brought formal apartheid to its knees, the ongoing and widespread protests in the country are a powerful portent of the continuing crisis of poverty and social reproduction. Thank you. Yeah.
Idea from your research what percentage of land or how much land in South Africa is unused or underused or accruing debt that would fit your description of land that would pose a threat to decreasing food production in the country if expropriated?
This is the research I'm calling for here.
That's been done.
It's not. Has it been done?
Yeah, by Prof and Sullivan, they determined that there's 27 million hectares of unused arable land in South Africa.
Ah.
I think there's something like 4 million of those are in the homelands. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Exactly.
I would like. We should talk, and I need that reference. This notion of unused, underutilized land came to me in my day-to-day work, doing research.
Yeah.
Go to these areas, the farmer owns 6 farms and use 1 farm. The other farm keeps 10 cattle when it could keep 200 cattle. That kind of research, if it has been done, it would be a good starting point.
How many hectares did you say?
27 million
That's a lot.
hectares of unused arable land.
Yeah. And it's arable. Because, whenever I raise this point, people are saying that, look, the land that is not used, again, it's not based on research, that the land that's not used is infertile land. It's not true. Some of the areas now that work in the Elliot district and so on, it's good land. that is kept for speculation often. Yeah. You had your hand at 1, 2, 3. Okay, you'll come no. So 1, 2, 3. It's you. Yeah.
Yes, okay. Professor, you're very good. I'm all in favor of. I'm a valuer, by the way. I'm a property valuer.
Oh, good.
And so I'd like to commend you on what you're saying, and to mention something that you haven't mentioned, and that is that the owner does not make the value of land. The owner makes the value of shoes, or cars, legal documents. The average value of an urban property today is 800,000 rand. Now, not 1 cent of that is made by the owner. It is made by nature, climate, the soils, and it is made by the state spending on infrastructure and on services. So the value has not been made by the owner, so there's no reason why you should pay any compensation. Because it hasn't been made by the owner.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But the second thing is that, which would make it much easier still, is if the state stopped expropriating the fruits of people's work and wealth through income tax and VAT. Now that is the most extraordinary thing. That is in fact today. Every month the state takes from us, from all citizens, whether rich or poor, it takes part of our wages, part of our salaries, part of our profits, part of our interest, without compensation. So the simple thing to do, and this is what happens really in exceptional countries like Hong Kong and Singapore, where even the poorest are quite rich, is to stop. Get rid of your income tax and that, and just tax the land. You'll get the same amount of money, and then you'll not find 1 hectare that's unused.
Where? Yeah, I mean, that's one angle. I mean, I'm a professor. I mean, this is the kind of topic you can get a student. Raise sort of money, bursary, and then get a PhD student to do sort of this kind of work. But we need more. We need more, and we need to distribute that kind of information.
I'd like to start by referring to yesterday's lecture where I discovered that there was, as you told me just before we started, there was approximately 2,000 hectares on that farm. It looked after 25 people. Cape Town grows at a rate of approximately 25 people an hour. You're going to put people on the land. It's quite easy to do the calculation. You could have the 82 million hectares of white farms or farmland totally in the hands of everybody in 5 years. If you gave everybody 25 years, but you only mop up 1 million workers then. That's all. Then you would consume all agricultural land. So it's not a solution. The numbers don't add up if you do things the way that you were thinking of doing things yesterday. It just illustrates that you have to have large farms. Now, I was a Free State farmer for 5 years. We had just on 9,000 hectares of land. We also knew there were another 27,000 hectares of land which were unused. We sat down with the Department of Agriculture and said, can we please do something about this unused land? We had a big meeting. 300 of the local farmers, approximately 200 would-be farmers. Not one of those would-be farmers had a degree in agriculture. Not one of those people had a degree in business. Every single one of the farmers there had at least one degree working in agriculture. You had to have it to farm 3,000 hectares. You couldn't do otherwise. You had cash flows of the order of 10 million a year. So at the moment you're starting to talk of 3,000 hectares of land, you've got to have some professional help. You've got to have the proper accountants, you've got to have a proper marketing plan, you've got to have all those things. It's not easy. So the sort of solution we were looking at yesterday, it's not replicable, it's not sustainable. And this is the problem that we face the whole time. Agriculture has now got big, it's got productive, and it's all very well said, one capital is doing it all. It can be done by anybody. Casmain, for instance, is a wonderful example, I don't know if you know, of
Charles Van Ossen, the seed is mine.
Right.
Mm.
Yes.
Mm.
A wonderful example he was of a farmer who could actually do something.
Mm.
But he had to make use of white capital in order to do that. At one stage he had to make use of black capital. Sam Montagnier farm he went and worked on. He was the worst chap ever to work for. So the problem is, I hear what you're saying on your reflections, but I think you've got to do a little bit of arithmetic, work out just where the practicalities are. You're not going to mop up the population like the very nice lady said yesterday. It'd be lovely if we could all return to the farm. We'd love to. My grandparents were peasant farmers, and you know, they'd have. I've now got waterborne sewage for the next few weeks.
Yeah. I suppose, one of the points I'm trying to make here is that, knowledge of local conditions and knowledge of the people, what they do, what they want, their aspirations, is important, and it is something that must be factored in. What I see in the work I do, in the work he does, in the work my students do on this mentorship program, is that you get people who come to these areas with expert knowledge and start dictating to people what to do and not even listen to what they want. This social facilitation that Fanny was talking about yesterday, we didn't have time to talk about that case, but he has written a thesis. He's got a PhD thesis. You can get that thesis where the details are there. And the mentor came, but the mentor had this technocratic approach. You need this and that and that. Couldn't read what people were interested in, building on what they're interested in, coming up with new solutions in that would suit everybody and so on. All that is interested in is that, look, we should get X amount of money. And in the process, a group of 40 people has gone down to 25 people. And there are all sorts of tensions and so on. So I'm not anti-expertise and so on, but I'm against arrogant expertise that treat people as if they know nothing, even about themselves and about their own conditions, the areas they were born in.
But that's very true, sir, because all you need to make some money in South Africa is to take a pit and put it in the ground and water it and do that 100,000 times or so. And you'd be richer.
Okay, there was a hand. Yeah. Can you speak? Says he doesn't have a mass rally voice.
Radical economic What we need to do, Professor, is that we need to sensitize our people. There are a number of people that want to work the They need to be identified. And what happened at Ntsebeza that you propose to do that? Our white counterparts also need to be part of this process and see that the stand. Because it's in the interest of South Africa, not just in the interest of
Okay. Yeah. I mean, he's, I don't know whether he's talking about what should be done, especially with the politicians exposing them and so on. And my response there is that this is a big job. It needs people who can do all sorts of things. And in that cake, I have a tiny slice, and that slice is to do research. If you want me to research an issue, then I'll do the research, make the information, the outcome of the research available and accessible. My students know that even, especially those who do PhD, that a PhD is not awarded on the basis of writing obscure language and so on. It's it's given on the basis of the coherence of what you are saying, and you can say it simply. Complex things. So that is something I can do. And maybe the information or the research outcome that we have could be used by other people who are involved in politics to make sense of but I can't promise you that I'll go out and expose Zuma and say, this is what you do. There's a hand right to the back.
They were not even involved in the design of a business plan. Nobody maintained them on that. Okay, I'm going to stop here.
Yeah.
I think people understand where I'm coming from. That there's a big gap. And the one other thing that I say to rural development, you cannot employ somebody who's a town planner and expect him to be a social scientist that understands agriculture.
Yeah. I mean, the critical point here is that clearly, there is interest, in this topic, and it's quite clear, that some studies have been made. And what will be important for me is to get a sense of these studies. And given where I am, we could even make it a project to collect what exists, review what exists, and see what further research should be done, rather than reinvent the wheel. So if people want to know, I mean, it's after 6:30 now, and if people really, I mean, are interested in this, that's my job. So we can continue the conversation beyond this. But there were 2, 3 years, this one, and this one, number 1, 2, and 3. Those are the last 3. And short, to the point.
I was 3 last time.
Yes, it was.
Huh?
I was 3 last time.
Oh, do you want to be 1? Okay, let me make you number 1.
You mentioned there was a demand from landless people for urban land.
Yes.
What sort of urban land and properties is that demand in? What do they want? Shops, houses, factories?
Well, I mean, for ordinary people, the biggest demand is residential land. Because these are people who are in the so-called informal settlements. And they are all over the place. That's where your biggest demand is. And this is where most of the oppression is taking place, the anti-eviction campaign, the anti-eviction squad and so on. And but then there is also a demand for land for agricultural purposes in this town, in this city, what I call urban agriculture. And if there's a student who's doing a PhD on exactly those kinds of struggle. So I know when I talk about the land question, we've talked about the homelands, this series. But if you read my work, you'll see that I divide the landscape, the South African landscape, into 3. I look at the former bantustans, I look at commercial farms, and I look at urban areas. And I argue that across those, there are land issues. So it would require another series to talk about urban land, which is important. Urban land as it affects poor people, urban land as it affects small business people who want to put up a shop or something, and urban land as it affects people who want to do business.
Urbanization is a world trend. Cities are getting bigger all the time.
Well, you might challenge you. That is not just that movement from the rural to it's in South Africa and in most African countries that I've done research in, it's both. People are in the urban areas, they're in the cities. I see people here, when I went to the countryside in December and so on, I meet the same people. And then we meet in Cape Town. So they move up and down. Some of the people who work for you, and I'm sure you employ people, ask them where they come from. One, and it's you, and then you. Yeah. After him, please. Why is the sort of the farm? Why are the farms what most? Oh, focus. Okay. Yeah. Well, No, I mean, no, you sort of, I'm sure no, you had that question, but no, you missed the point that I've just made. That no, I divide no, the landscape. Agriculture no, is one aspect, and agriculture you divide into commercial.
My question is why is 99.9% of the focus, including your focus today and over the past 3 days, and including the focus of the current debate, why is that focus almost exclusively agriculture?
That's not me. I mean, you have to choose something. I can't deal no, with all this.
I think it's because of the media. If you look at localized reporting in Cape Town, there's no farmland that's in question. It's District 6, it's Constantia, it's Hart Bay. It's not agricultural land at all. I think it is quite regional, and it's specifically what the media focused on, and because I think farm murders are such a big topic in the media. But if you look locally in Cape Town, there's no agricultural land that's being restricted. It's mostly residential, like those Peasantry stations. I think
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, my critique of the land, part of the problem no, is no, how the land question is conceptualized by the government. For them, the land question no, is about agriculture and rural. And no, urban land issues are given a different name. If it's people, no, young people, no, so they say it's under housing. As if no. And my critique, no, in my work, my critique is that, I mean, no, those are land issues. Those are land issues. Mining and all those things, I mean, these are all land issues. But if you follow the logic of the state, right, then you get into this trap of thinking that when you talk about land reform, you're only talking about agriculture and rural. And if you're talking about an African who's unemployed, give them a piece of land, assuming that no, they can use the land, which is not the case. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
My question is possibly not right for this point, but so feel free to say you don't want to deal with it. But we have this land expropriation or compensation. Why has it not been applied? What has happened that it has failed? Has it been the white farmers that don't want to sell their land, or what? If we have a system, why has it only transferred 10%?
Well, once again, I mean, I can talk about my own research now about what there were attempts, I think twice, in the 2000s, the first decade of when the ANC government tried to introduce an expropriation bill. But the minute you mention the term expropriation, whether with and then it was expropriation within the constitution and so on, which was with compensation, there was no hue and cry. And there were threats that no, this is unconstitutional. We'll take you to court. Are you bringing sort of? Is this another Zimbabwe? So no, there is that kind of pressure. And as I say, the minute rich people threaten you with court action, what can you do?
So are you saying it's in the Constitution, but we haven't got the legal structure to do it? Is that what you're saying?
There is, but law is contestable.
Okay.
It's contestable. No, you interpret it one way, and then people with money say, no, you're wrong. This is not what the law says. Let's go to the constitutional court. Let's go to this court to show, for it to decide who is right.
Necessary if the laws are already there?
No. The Constitution says that no legislation must be put in place to. Yeah.
So there is no legislation. There's just there is.
Now there is legislation on land redistribution and so on, but expropriation. The law that Zuma was talking about. Yeah, expropriation. It's a law that's supposed to facilitate the process of expropriating land. And it's not been easy. That law has been referred to Parliament on a number of occasions, no consultation.